Hey there and welcome to Gen VFX. This is Gary here with another 1x1 tutorial. I don't know, it's kind of a bit of both really. Basically, the 1x1 that I was going to do, where the only problem with this particular modifier is it does literally what it says. And if you have it on its own, it doesn't really do a great deal. You obviously know which one it is because you're looking at this in the first place. So you've obviously seen the title, which is this one is the 1x1 modifier Edgesplit. So I suppose the best thing to do is get into a good reason for why you'd use it. As I say, not really on its own, not as perfect as that. So let's just zoom in because I'm going to keep this default cube. I'm going to keep this with us. I think it might help. So I'm going to turn on wireframe. Then we're going to see the edges. In object mode, I'm going to add a subdivision surface, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. So no, that's too many. 3. Yeah, that's what I wanted. 3. So I've got 3 layers with a subdivision, and I'm just going to apply this. So I've got this nice little ball. It's not a perfect ball, obviously, because it's a subdivision ball built from a cube. So if you can actually see it's not perfectly circular, but it's actually really good for what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do first of all, as I leave that on, as I say, with a wireframe, I'm going to pick this. I'm going to make the object smooth. That will help, I promise. And then layer down here, and in the normals, I'm just going to turn on auto smooth as well, because again, that will also help. What I'm actually going to do right now is I'm going to turn off wireframe, because I'm going to show you what edge split actually does. So it splits edges. It does sound ridiculous when I say it like that. Go to the modifier stack, go to generate, come down here. We've done all of these. We've done some of the ones down here, and we're going to do edge split. Now, it doesn't look like it's done a thing, and the reason for that is because edge split does, it just splits edges. So what it essentially does is it takes an object which is sealed, like this is, there are no holes in it, there are no gaps in it, and then as you bring down the degree value, and you'll notice what will happen, I'll reach a certain point and you'll start to see lines appear. Wait for it, wait for it. Aha, there we go. You can just see, if you look here, you can just see an edge. And the reason why you can see an edge is because it's cutting that edge, it's separating it, almost like if you were cutting UVs. So as I go down past 13 to 12, you can see more of these edges appearing. So each one of these essentially now is non-connected. And once you bring it down to 0, probably even a little bit higher than 0, because it's based on the angle of the object. There you go, about 7. Every single one of those is split. It's suddenly gone from smooth to sharp edges. So what we'll do is I'll just put it back to 30 for a second so it looks nice and smooth. And I'm going to add to this edge split, I'm going to add a displace node. So I'm not going to put a texture in it, I'm just going to add a displace mode, and immediately it displaces it 1 unit away, or 1 strength away, 1 value. And it probably is actually about a unit, because if I just turn this off, let's have a little look. It's about half a unit. Anyway, the point is that is now all been displaced. So if I bring this down now, when it reaches the threshold, there you go. Essentially, it looks like it's a rip because it's only pushing them apart, but they're displaced because they're not being. The displace is not holding them. Those edges are not being held together because the displace is saying, "Oh well, that's a separate edge, so therefore that's going to displace in a more linear manner. It won't try and blend between the two." So as you bring those down, you see more rips and more rips and more rips until you get down to just individual faces. There you go. So that's really, really nice. It's really, really useful. Because what we can do then, you see, is we can take something like a solidify and we can thicken that. So there we can go and just take that up. And that thickens that value. You can turn on even thickness as well. Not that it makes a huge amount of difference for this because it's each one's an individual face. Doesn't really have lot of stuff to calculate. But then if I then increase that sharpness, you can see it starts to reform our ball in bits, and that's actually it's quite funky. So let's just leave that about there. So it's kind of a little bit of all sorts. And I'm just going to go here and I'm going to put underneath this solidify, I'm going to put a subdivision surface. And now if I just pop that to 2, and I'll just take the solidify and I'm just going to thicken this out a bit more. So it's a little bit more like that. There we go. Yeah, that's about right. I like that. That's nice. So what we're kind of getting is almost this, it's almost like a skinned sort of, a skinned ball, essentially. And the only reason that's really working is because of the edge split, you see. So that's from a solid object. And as we bring this down, it slowly cracks it open. And then the subdivision and everything. And you get a variety of shapes. And that's really, really nice because you can do all sorts of little things with that, which is lovely. And also you can animate this as well. And we can also animate, of course, the displacement. So we'll actually leave that at about 0, say, and then we can animate that to increase in size as this decreases. And then also we can go into the solidify and we can thicken this or thin this. You can make it more sort of a little bit more dotty. And then we can also then, I mean, I'll pop those. I'll leave, no, leave those as they are. That's nice. So that can be, it can be quite an interesting little shape. And if we just reduce the strength of that, there we go. Then they're a little bit closer together, just a little bit more compact. And of course, all of this is completely animatable. So if I just bring this to the front view, in fact, let's press O. Let's go to N on here and let's select our camera. And I'm going to call the cube, I'm going to call it FancyBall. And let's go back to the camera, set the X to 0, set the Y to 0, set the Z to 0. And then so here we have our little ball, and I'm just going to very quickly now just leave that as it is. I'm not going to lock onto it, so I can just do that and pop out quite quickly. So let's now go into the animation section. So I'm going to go to the beginning here, and I'm going to press, I'm going to put my cursor to that, go I, insert the keyframe, go to the last frame, go I to insert a keyframe. Let's go to 75. No, let's go to about 80. And let's set this to almost but not quite 0. Actually, let's just have a little bit of something in the corners. There you go. Let's set a keyframe. So let's animate into there. Let's take it to here. Set that to 0. And then insert that keyframe. So if we're looking at this now, we're getting a little bit of animation going through. That's hitting 0. Pretty sharpish that actually, isn't it? So let's leave that as it is, and then it comes back here to a close. And that, let's set that to 13. Nope. 13.5. 13.5. 14 will be fine. 14, there you go, why not? Okay. Now what I'm also going to do is going to start here. And let's press I over the strength to make a keyframe. Go to 250, press I over that to replace a keyframe. I'm going to go to about 80. Let's go to 60. Set the strength to 1. We will adjust the camera, don't worry. The position of the camera. Okay, so that's there. Come up here. Let's set that to 1. Set that to 1. And insert a keyframe. I'm going to shift that strength displaced keyframe over here. So it goes back, so it goes back to 0. And then I'm going to add something else in here to add a little bit more interest. But let's just very quickly, if I just play that back, so it kind of like grows and starts to split, and then it goes, ooh, and then it's really there. And it's really like, oh, look, it's all nice and bubbly. Bubbly, 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 bubbly. And then it's back to a ball. Now, because it's the way it's been built also, it's happening the same as happening on the top, the sides, and the bottom. So each side is perfectly fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this FancyBall, as it's called, and I am going to go into its rotation. And I'm going to stick a keyframe on its rotation. And I'm going to move this over to 250, and then its Z rotation, I'm going to type in 90. I'm going to go insert keyframe. So what that does now is that it's rotating around during the course of this, doing all of its business, and going back to where it started. Now again, all of this is really, really nice and simple, looks really nice, but I still want to add something in here to make that feel a little bit more weird. And this is where a previous modifier is really, really good. So I'm going to add Decimate. Now Decimate, what that basically does, as you're aware, is it kind of reduces the number of polygons. Kind of tries to reduce it in a sensible manner. So at the moment, it's completely above absolutely everything in our timeline, so actually it's going to slow it down a little bit because it's trying to do calculations on the fly up there, and it's just being very clever, but that's not what I want. I want to move this above the Displaced. So there it is, and it's going far. But even that's not far enough. I'm going to put it above the Edgesplit. So what happens is that this Decimate is cutting it into pieces before it does the edge split. So it's changing the quality of the triangles basically. So if I just turn off, and then if I pop on the wireframe again, here we go. You can see it's decimating our ball. So when you turn on the edge split, the edge split's on the Decimate. Once you put the Displace on, it's you can see how it's pushing them out and separating them around. So then of course you put on the Solidify, and then you're getting this kind of like shattering ball effect. Now that's fine in its own right, but the moment you put on that subdivision surface, what happens is you get these lovely sort of like blobby bits. Really nice. It's particularly nice if you reduce it down here. You can put it, if you want to, you can put it above the edge split, but it just, I don't know, I like it, but it's not what I wanted for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that as it is, so it actually doesn't break up at the very beginning. So let's set a keyframe there on that. By the time it's reached 60, let's bring it down a bit, just a little bit to there. Let's put in a keyframe. So we get a sort of like a sort of popping, sort of like plop, 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 and it feels a bit liquidy, which is quite nice. And then here, let's break it down a bit more. Put a keyframe in. Here, I'm going to push it all the way back to 1. Stick in a keyframe, and then I'm going to bring this down so it's a bit more blobby again here. And then sort of like seems to seal itself up. So let's set that back just enough that it reforms at 1 again there. So if I play this back now, what we have is a ball which kind of shatters itself a little bit, breaks into pieces, and it really has a kind of a motion graphic kind of feel. And that's what I'm going for. That's truly what I'm going for. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to duplicate this ball. I'm going to go Shift D, and I'm going to press Escape so it stays in the middle. And it's got all of these modifiers on, same as the other one. So I'm going to keep on Subdivision. I'm going to turn off Subdivide. I'm going to leave on Displace. I'm going to turn off Edge Split, and I'm going to turn off Decimate. So what we get is a ball which is kind of doing exactly the same as the other one, but then just to make it work a little bit better, I'm going to go to a highest point here, go to Edit Mode, and you can see the ball. It's a little bit smaller than the other one. So let's turn on its actual what happens in Edit Mode to be visible in Object Mode. Sorry, to be visible in Edit Mode. Select all of those. Scale, and there we go. So just going in. It's just on the inside of that ball. So now when we play this back, what happens is we get the one ball appearing underneath as being revealed. So it's just got this kind of like nice animation-y kind of like thing. A little bit spotty, and then a little bit out of the ordinary, and then sort of like popping, so it's very, very ordinary. It just starts to match itself, so it's like everything's separated, just a bunch of dots over another sphere. And I'm kind of liking that. But obviously our camera's now too close, so let's just go back to Object Mode, and let me pull back so I can see the camera. Let's just pull it back a bit so it's actually full. So it's time to go into shading, and we're going to back to Object Mode, and I'm going to very quickly go to Scene World and Lights. Now our world doesn't actually have any background in it as yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an environment texture. So I'm going to stick in a texture from HDRI Haven. Thank you again. You are just constantly giving me great stuff. I mean, I do use this one quite a lot, if truth be told. And I'm going to change this light as it currently stands to a sun lamp and set it to about 1. Just so there's a little bit of light coming on. And I'm going to move it. I'm just going to very, very quickly drag down here and stick in a timeline so I can actually adjust the keyframe. So we've got things that are looking pretty. So we've got FancyBall 1, and that's obviously got a principal shader on there already. So let's very quickly, let's stick in a little bit of interesting flavor. So as I said, I got node wrangler on, so I press Control T and I get some mapping. I'm going to change it from point to texture. And I'm going to add some height from this Musgrove, which I'll set to 20 and to 20 and to 0.25 on the dimmer from scale, detail and dimension. And let's add a bump vector. Let's add the height into the height and the normal into the normal. Straight away you'll see a lot of stuff going on because this is on both of the objects. So we'll just basically very quickly, there we go, let's move off. And so we can just see what's happening here. And it's a little bit high. So I'm going to set that to 0.2. I'm going to make this object a lot darker. I'm going to give it a little bit of blue. Make it even darker still. We're zooming in and we're going to reduce the roughness, I think, a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of metal in there because I like the fact of it being metal-y. And let's increase the specular. It's going to make it rougher. No, actually, no, I'm going to leave that so it's kind of nice and metally. And I'm going to pick this inner sphere now. And let's add a new material using the same base as this one. And let's change this so it's green, maybe. Green might be quite nice. Maybe if I make it a little bit paler, maybe. Let's be a little bit more saturated. I like that. Yep. And a little bit up. And let's take the subsurface. I'm going to set this to 0.5. There you go. So it's got a kind of a slightly milkier kind of look as well, which is nice. Now let's have a look at this one and let's just make some alterations to the texture, I think. So let's set that to 0.2, 0.2, and 0.2, and that still looks a little bit heavy. Let's reduce the detail somewhat and the scale. So it's just a little bit. There we go. Yeah, that looks nasty and soupy. Oh yeah, that's fancy. So we just check down here. Yeah, you see it's kind of solid and it's starting to come through, and then we're seeing it seeping in. That's kind of good. It's got that kind of a motion graphic, so like cookies and cream kind of motion graphic thing. But then it becomes very, very regular, and then it sort of like drops back down. So it's like, there we go. That was nice and quick. So there we go. That's in there, and let's go to our settings, and very quickly I want to change that to multi-layer AXRs because I can change frame rate to 25 because I'm living in the UK, and we have a system called PAL, which is 25 frames per second, rather than the American system, which is 24. No, sorry, I tell a lie, it's 29.97, and film would be 24. Yeah, that's correct. So well, look, I'm just assuming it's TV. So I've got all of these on here. I'm going to go to outputs and I'm going to call it, and let me just aim it at my VFX renders. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go into main, and I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call it cookies and cream. And just go into that folder and let's call it CNC. Put an underscore because it makes a lot more sense to put an underscore there. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to go up to here. I'm going to go open film. I'm going to put transparent, which means it'll get rid of the environment. So if I now click the rendering button very quickly, you'll see we've got our boggy sphere, and then if you press F12 over here, we've got our cookies and cream, and over here it's like a cookies and putrid cream, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, this is remember, this is just doing it in Eevee, not trying to do it anything fancy. Just in Eevee. And what I will do as well is, because this is going to work, this would work quite nicely actually, is I will then go from here. Let's go back to a shading window. Let's go back to a shading. Let's have a little look here. That's nice. I'm going to add another light. Just another one. Why have I not in my collection? Even though I shouldn't really have to worry too much. There's a lot of light coming in here already from the HDR probe that we've got in the back. So let's put in a point light. And let's pop it over here. So let's have a look. Where's our point light? Our point light should be at the 0 because that's where the grid is. So let's go T and let's move it over here and over here. I think I might just maybe push it back, push it to the side a little bit. There we go. And let's get to its wattage and let's set it to 120 watts. And I'm going to try and bring some orange into that. Let's have a look at the front. Yes, that's kind of nice. Let's pull back a little bit, just pull back a tiny bit so I can muck with it a little bit and get a rough idea of how it's going to look down the camera. Push this over here. Yeah, that's really, I quite like that actually. I quite like that. I'm going to do a Shift D on that to make another one. And I'm going to put this one behind. Let's try and put it something really stupidly bright. See if we get anything out of this. Not really. The subsurface isn't really doing what I would properly like it to do, which is bleed some of that light through. Not to its fullest. But I quite like it down there. Let's have a look at, oh, and that. Yeah, I don't mind that actually. Let's have that there, but I don't want that color. So let's try something a little bit more opposing. So let's put a little bit of blue in there. So we're actually pulling the opposite color to the orange, which is a good way of getting nice complementary lighting. There's already, actually, to be honest, there's actually a lot of lighting going on in there already, but I'm going to leave that as it is. And then if I push through this, you can see still it's all picking up, little bits of light picking up on the stuff. I kind of like that. I like that. And that. Let's see, we're getting, go over here a bit, about there. Yeah, you see there's now we're getting lots of pick light, just edge light, picking up all this little bits of stuff. That's nice. So what we're going to do now is the other thing I wanted to do, which is to go into the animation settings here and add one more thing. And it is another little trick, it's another little tip, and it's about adding extra motion to your animation without actually affecting what your animation you've already got. I just want to add a little bit of like a tiny boil into the scale. So it's kind of a, so it's a little bit of the displacement being so linear. I just want a little bit of a whoa, as if it's just trying to generate a bit more motion. And the best way to do that is to actually use a modifier. So let's pick our FancyBall. I'm going to change this from the dope sheet here. Let's change this to the graph editor. Let's just press N over here so I can see stuff. And I'm going to turn off the ones that I don't want to see and just pick on this one, which is Displaced. And I'm going to press the decimal key on the number pad, and that basically isolates us just what's visible. And I'm going to press it again now, pick those keyframes. So now I can see the exact animation that's going on in here. Now I don't really want to mess with it too much because I want this to stay proud of the inner ball. So if I mess with this too much, it'll start to pop in and out of the other ball. So what I'm going to do here, if you can see, is if I just pick on this line again, you can see we've got the active F curve, and which is doing exactly what it's meant to do. And then on the side we've got modifiers. So I'm going to go down here, I'm going to add noise. And straight away you can see it takes my animation curve and it adds to it, using it as the middle point of a noise curve, noise. Now you can see very distinctly that you've got, in this case it's the scale, and that's the essentially it's the how often it happens, the scale you can see. So as I scale that value up, it's like a temporal scale rather than a strength scale. And then we have here as a strength, so I can bring this down. So what happens now is it means it does all its stuff, but it's got a little bit of a shift in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the amount of times. You can see there it's just going a little bit. So if I just move this forwards, it's just pushing it just above that surface, the cookies and cream surface, and then it's back in all the way back. So that's quite nice, but I don't know, I want to let's just put a bit more phase into it. Just adds a little bit more information. Again, it's just that's the equivalent of, you know, if you have that animating, it's equivalent of just pushing noise through it on top of the noise that's already there. Phase is the noise, actually makes it animate. But the depth increases the amount of them. So it's almost like, I'm trying to think of the best description. With the depth of 0, you get 1 iteration. With the depth of 1, you get 1 iteration on top of that iteration. So you can see, if I just zoom in here and show you, see, if I set this to 0, we get 1 really nice smooth phase of animation. If I set this to 1, we get a second phase of animation, second depth as it were, going into the animation. If I set that to 2, we get another one again. So it's kind of, it just adds an extra layer of boil across the entire thing, which is lovely. But I don't want that. I'm just going to leave it at 1. And I'm going to reduce that down a little bit. So it's still got a little bit of excitement going on. And I'm going to let that drop down to there. So here's our ball, all animating, all singing, all dancing. We've got it shaded. Ooh, God blimey. I'm going to get rid of that blue light. I've changed my mind. I don't like it. Do not like. Goodbye, blue light. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to very quickly render these frames so we can see the fullness of the animation. I'll get right back to you. In fact, I'm going to let it render in this window. Now here's the thing, this is actually rendering in real time at, granted the render is only set to 64, but this is rendering HD in like a second a frame. What is it? Oh, here we go. That's a little bit slower, but it's still, I mean, I've never, I remember I was talking about, and this is just me twittering while this is rendering, because it's actually quite nice the fact that it's doing it in practically real time. I was chatting to a friend of mine called John Stopforth, and we're working on a podcast together at the moment, and I was talking about how I would love to go back and do my degree piece, which was The House of Death from the books of Terry Pratchett, that took me, I think it was 11 weeks to set up, and about 2, maybe 3 days to render at 640 by 480. I would love to go back and recreate that project. Take it now, so like just bring it up to now and do it so it looked exactly the same. Exactly the same. I didn't want to look any better or any worse. I would look exactly the same. And I reckon that not only could I build it and animate it, I could now also render the whole thing in a day. In a day. I'm absolutely certain of it, because the quality of the render, the quality of the render of my degree piece, and heaven knows where it is, I haven't got a clue anymore, but of my piece that basically got me my degree, actually looked worse than this, to such a point that I actually, hopefully I will never find it again, and I hope no one else will ever find it either. At the time though, I was quite pleased. It wasn't originally what I wanted to do, but in the end, you know, it wasn't bad. I did make one mistake when I was writing up all my notes about it. For some reason, I kept typing Ankh More Pock rather than Ankh More Pork. But they actually pointed it out to me. The lecturers laughed at me like I was a prat and then let me off. So I'll give them their due. I'm not going to complain. They were probably right, to be perfectly frank. Oh my days, that's just finished rendering. A little story and it's finished rendering. That's incredible. There you go. This is it. The whole thing running now in proper real time. Yeah, it's not the most incredible thing in the world. However, it was done in the matter of like how many minutes have I been doing? Have this been recording for? 38 minutes I've been recording. You won't be 38 minutes by the time you see it. By the time I edited out a few of the bloopers and a few of the gaffes. But yeah, it's kind of like some weird sort of like cookie and creamy kind of thing. I probably don't need that Displaced, to be honest with you, at the end of the day. But it is, you know, a 10-second animating cycle, and it does show you a very good use for Edgesplit. Or another good thing you can do with Edgesplit, actually, thinking about it. Now, well, I should have done that, of course, is to take a surface and you know, a flat grid, and then what you can do is you can run a displacement through it. and then you can decimate it as well, and then you can do the same thing with the solidify and then the subdivision surface. But then if you animate the displacement and then use the edge split, you can kind of like crack open the surface. And because you're animating the displacement across it, it actually undulates as it cracks. So it looks that can look quite nice. There's always uses for edge split, but not on its own. And I think that was the point I was trying to make. Anyway, so obviously this is another nice little thing. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and I will of course speak to you soon. If you have any comments, if you want any other information, anything at all, please subscribe. You can always visit my website, genvfx.com, and look after yourselves. Take care, guys. Bye.